Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that will give you a skill set that will make you marketable for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Metro Atlanta.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent, also from Atlanta, currently in North Carolina.
And I'm David Williams, and I'm a dad from Chicago, Illinois.
This week in the news, the Inside Higher Education article by Patrick Terenzini, Rethinking Effective Student Learning Experiences. Mark and Anika will discuss, how does the typical family pay for college? Our question from a listener is, I'm applying to Oglethorpe University, and they're asking me to describe an event that had an impact on my life. How do I answer this question? Our interview is the final part with Lisa Przekop on admission advice for foster care students. And our college spotlight comes to you from Los Angeles, and it is Loyola Marymount University.
Good afternoon, friends. And those of you who are very astute, you're thinking, hey, what happened at Tufts? You said last week you'd be talking about Tufts. So what happened is I got an invitation from Tufts to attend a special counselor program in the next couple of days. And so I said it'd be better for me to do the Tufts spotlight after I attend the counselor program. So we bumped up another request that we just recently received from Wisconsin, and we are doing Loyola Marymount today. Now, friends, I don't read emails that often, but I want to share one that came in today from a mom in Alabama. Here's what it says. I love the ability to search podcast transcripts. I was talking to my sister yesterday, and 3 things she was talking about, I knew you had covered in your podcast. All I had to do was search, and I sent her the links, and she could listen. I love it. So that comes from Cheryl in Alabama, and I share that with you because for those of you who are new to our podcast, we have a transcript feature. We've had it for, what would you say, Dave? Month and a half, maybe?
Yeah, a couple months at least.
Maybe a couple months. So you can go in, and if you're listening and you hear something you want to go back to, you can just search for that keyword. It'll pop up in yellow, and then you click it, and it will start playing right from there. So it's a great way to isolate specific topics without having to fumble all the way through a 2-hour podcast to find what you want to hear. Now, our regular listeners know that we go live on Thursdays. But what you may not know is that we recently bumped up our time. So we still go live Thursdays, but now we're going live at 12 a.m., which is 9 p.m. on the West Coast Wednesday. So if you're on the West Coast and you want to get an early start on our podcast, you can actually start listening at 9 p.m. Wednesday. Or if you're a night owl like me, you can listen at 12 a.m. So just a little change. We just moved up our time just about 6 to 8 hours in terms of when we go live every week. We received such great feedback from part 1 of my interview with Lisa Przekop, the director of admission at UC Santa Barbara. She's been in admissions there for 35 years. Well, you can meet Lisa right from your own home, right from your own computer. September 15th is she's doing a Zoom question and answer about anything college admissions related. In order to sign up, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, hit the resources tab, and you'll see another tab that says Q&A with YCBK interviewees. Go ahead, sign up. Lisa would love to meet you and get your questions answered. And if you don't have any questions, listen to other people's questions. I think you'll enjoy it. I'd love to give you feedback because we did our first one by the time you hear this, and it will be with Gil Villanueva. But because we're recording before that, I can't tell you how it went, but I know it's going to be good. First one's coming up with Gil in a couple of days.
Awesome.
One more announcement here. A recommended resource last week was a webinar with NYU professor Scott Galloway, who's one of the leading experts looking at financial turmoil colleges are under. I attended the webinar. I thought it was just fantastic. Now, I'm sure most people were busy and were unable to attend. The good news for you is my understanding, and I'm saying my understanding because literally I'm just getting out of the webinar right now and going right in to record with Dave, but it did come up in the webinar, is that it is going to be up on YouTube. And so I strongly encourage you to look for it. Just go to YouTube, search for Scott Galloway. Now, he has so many different interviews and so much content on YouTube. A couple other very, very good interviews on there he has as well that are a lot shorter, more like in the 15, 20-minute version. One is called The College Implosion, No Mercy, No Malice. And then another 20-minute segment he has on there is called Some Colleges Are About to Be the Walking Dead. And so I encourage you to check out both of those resources as well. I agree with about 80 to 85% of what Galloway says, but he's absolutely a voice worth listening to and processing what he has to say. He's definitely put a lot of thought into this. For our admissions tip, all right, we're going to get in the weeds on this one. If you're a rising freshman and you are getting financial aid and you are attending a school that requires the CSS profile, which are the most wealthy and most selective private schools, the majority of the schools that require this profile, most people don't know this, but there's a part of your expected family contribution that involves a summer student work component. And each school puts their own number on how much they expect a student to contribute to their college education based on their summer earnings. The numbers can be as low as 0, which is very rare, by the way. I've only found a very short list of schools that don't assign a summer work component that accept the profile. And it can be as high as $3,500, which is a lot. Because that not only do you need to make $3,500, they're talking about what you would contribute to your own school education. This doesn't count your own summer expenses. Now, here's where I'm going with this. Because of COVID-19, you may not have been able to work. So I am encouraging you, if you're in that category, once again, what category is that? It means you are applying to us, you are enrolling in a school that required the CSS profile. As I said, normally wealthier, private, more selective schools do. And you're getting financial aid. I'm encouraging, and you were impacted, your ability to work because of COVID. I'm encouraging you to appeal that because this is a place where you have a good grounds for getting some more money. Just simply say, find out from the financial aid office, was there a summer work component built into the number you came up for me? And if there is, then you explain how you weren't able to work and ask if you could appeal this. And some schools will absolutely do that for you, and they'll convert that money to grant money. So you could get an extra $2,000 out of this. Any thoughts, Dave?
I think that's huge. I mean, the reality is there is no income for 40% of our population right now. And I'm looking around in Chicago, all the jobs that the students were going to do, hospitality and retail and restaurant, they've been completely obliterated. So, yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic advice because I know you went in depth. You really did a deep dive on the CSS profile. How far back was that, Mark? I want to say about 3 or 4 months ago. But
we've done it a few times. You know, this is where transcripts can come in handy. You know, actually, I've realized about our website, if you just go to the main search bar, main search bar, and just search CSS profile, it will pull up the episode, and then you can go to the transcript and go right to the spot. So we've actually addressed the profile quite a few times.
We were talking about the transcript service, and I was about to say that how I'm going to have to start using the transcript service, because so often you talk about these issues that we've done multiple times. I'm trying to search my memory to figure out what episode was that. But getting back to point, I mean, if you're a student and you are relying on summer experiences or summer work to fill in some of your financial obligations, you absolutely have to appeal that. There's no greater reason than what's going on in our economy right now.
Yeah, and I'll get really personal. So I was at a work meeting a couple months ago, and I heard my boss mention we had an employee leave. And I'm talking about my day job, KIP, where I do college counseling. I'm a director of college counseling there in the day. And my boss mentioned, when that employee left, really appreciate how some of you guys stepped up to the plate and contributed, and you're going to see a stipend in your next paycheck. And so in my next one-on-one meeting, I made the case how I didn't do that because I don't work with that particular school, but I had provided a lot of training for a new employee that was well beyond the scope of my job description. I said, I think I deserve a stipend. And to make a long story short, she had to talk to the powers that be, and they came back and gave me a stipend. And the only reason I share that is if you don't speak up, you don't get it. It's if not speaking up is the same as being told no. So there's no downside in asking. So didn't mean to get too personal there, but hopefully I was making a point.
That's right. What they say, the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
The squeaky wheel gets the grease.
The early bird gets the worm.
and closed mouths don't get fed.
That's right.
Closed mouths don't get fed. So admissions vernacular, Dave. Here we go. Okay. I was in a college counseling session this week, and this term came up. Yeah. And I said, ooh, I don't think I've used this one. So here's the term, merit within need. Merit within need. What do you think that means?
Merit with it. Okay, let me use my Anika powers of analysis here. Merit. I know merit means you deserve it. But need means you need it. So merit within need means even though you need it, you sure deserve it. So you need it. You should have a double dose because you both merited it and you need it. Give me that money.
Oh, my goodness. You're so funny. Because the reason why you're funny is every single thing you said was correct, but I can tell you don't know what you're talking about. But everything you said was accurate. All right, so let me put a little
elementary, my dear Watson.
Let me put a little flesh on the bones. So you get schools, and there's quite a few of them, tend to be more selective schools, and they say that we do not give away any merit money. We only give away need-based aid in order to get money. So if you don't qualify based on an assessment of your income and assets of the student and the parent, then we don't give away any money. And so it seems like, okay, open and shut case. That's a need-based analysis. But what they may not say is how they apportion student employment, which we just talked about earlier, loans and grants. That can change based on how badly they want you. So in other words, if you're a rock star and we're going to take you, rock star within our pool, versus someone else who we're just accepting within our pool, if we really, really want you badly enough, then we may offer you less loans and less of a work component in your aid award and give you more free money. That's an example of it's still need-based aid, but we used merit considerations to give you a better package than somebody else. Does that make sense?
Yes, I understand. So bottom line is you can come and we're even going to get you out of the cafeteria.
Hey, you just broke that down. I love it.
That's right.
That's good stuff. All right, Dave, article time. Take it away.
Okay, well, this is a great article, and I know that this is one that you want to go really in depth on. So what I'd like to do is introduce the article and briefly mention the 6 major principles, and then we will double back and do a deep dive into each one of these principles. How's that sound, Mark?
Yeah, either that or you could just introduce it and give
let's do one at a time.
Yeah, and let's do one at a time.
Let's do that.
I'm a suspense guy. I like to leave a little.
No problem.
Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
Patrick Terenzini wrote this article for Inside Higher Education, Rethinking Effective Student Learning Experiences. He's a gentleman who has spent his life studying how students learn. And he says straight up in this article, this is based on over 40 years of studying college students and based on him having reviewed over 7,000 published studies. And he opens it up and says, what did we learn? What day-to-day actionable nuggets are buried in the data that can help faculties and universities better educate students? And he comes up with 6 principles or characteristics of experiences that he believes that helps students learn. So, Mark, let's dive right in. Let's start with the first one. And number 1 is that the experiences.
Hey, Dave, let me just add a couple of things before you dive into number 1. So I just want to underscore, I want to make sure nobody missed this. So 50, this is based on 50 years of research, over 7,000 academic studies. And it asks an extremely important question, which is what teaching methods are effective?
Yes.
Okay. Like we just assume, oh, I go to college, I'm going to learn. Well, how do you know you're going to learn? Yeah. And what I like about this is in a lot of ways, you could say this is an alternative way of evaluating schools other than using rankings. Instead of just using somebody's formula based on how they see beauty, if you respect the research, and this is a substantial amount of research, and like Dave said, this guy dedicated his life to this. He wrote over 130 scholarly journals, professor emeritus at Penn State, 50 years of education, and he collaborated with many other people. And what we're going to share with you today are the proven effective teaching methods. So if you're a teacher out here listening, I encourage you to ask yourself, how much do you incorporate this into your pedagogy? Right. If you're a student in high school, ask yourself, how much of this is going on right now in my high school? If you're thinking about a college, ask yourself, how can I assess which of these methods will be used in my college education? So that's just a little preamble I wanted to throw in there, Dave. Now, take it away.
Take it away. Okay, so the first principle or characteristic of an experience that helps students learn is number one, they must involve encounters with challenging ideas and or people. Mark, what say you to that?
Yeah, I really love this. You know, he starts out by saying it's Newton's first law of motion and action. And then he goes on to say this, and here's a quote from the article, which I love. In a student's educational life, the outside force challenging the student presents ideas, beliefs, perspectives, or educational environments that are different from those that the student holds or accepts. This outside force, it might be people who are different from the student in significant ways, but whatever its nature or source is, in or beyond the classroom, if the challenge is not so minor that it is barely noticed, or it's not so overwhelming that it's quickly rejected, what it does is it opens up the door to a broader or deeper knowledge, to the reformation of ideas or beliefs, to the adoption of more differentiated and complex understanding. So let's break that down, Dave. So this is, you're sitting in a class and they're talking, about, well, we could say anything, economics. Yeah. And, you hear perspectives that are completely different from your own upbringing and worldview. Maybe you were, taught that anybody who is poor is just completely lazy. Yeah. And that's just the bottom line. And then you're in the class and that view is challenged by some people who have different perspectives that cause you to have to think. And what it's saying is that all quality education will involve that tension. It won't just be you surrounding yourself with homogeneity with your own people who think like you, look like you, act like you. That does not produce growth, which is one of the reasons why colleges strive so much for diversity and all types of diversity.
The obvious one is race.
Right.
Right. I think religion, and then I think socioeconomic status. Mm-hmm. So I think those are the big three that rich and poor, black and white, Christian, Muslim, and other is the three that.
Yeah, I think those are all really big, and I would agree. I think a lot of times gender, gender would be another one that's very common. People see things different on the basis of gender, and that's all of those are
and gender definitions now. I mean, certainly that's a difference from when we grew up, but the different ways that we look at sex in that sense. Yes,
definitely. And so all of those are important. They're all important components of diversity. And I figured those would be ones you'd guess. There's another extremely important one, and that is ideology.
Yes.
Ideology or culture.
Yeah.
And so having all of that disparate type of thinking will produce tension, because it will force you to examine your own belief system and ask yourself, is everything that I've been raised with correct? Or because this other person is presenting a very, very cogent perspective that's very different than mine. And so what it's saying is, if those type of environments where true learning occurs. All right, Dave, you want to move on to number 2? Because you and I can talk for hours on this topic. You know that.
Well, we'll circle back because there are some more things that we could have talked about. That, I mean, that's such an amazing point about how you are challenged with different ideas. I mean, I remember my daughter talking about her roommates and just how one was from Taiwan and one was from Europe and another one was from central area of the Midwest. So there's so many ways. And now each one of them taught her something that she did not know about in terms of belief systems and cultures.
I got to throw one thing in there on that.
Yeah.
So I attended it was a college, this whole last week I was at a college counseling training event. Of course, this is all virtual. And I attended a great session on rural students. And I realized just some of the struggles that rural students deal with that I don't even think about that much. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things it talked about is imagine you having to drive 20 minutes just to get your phone to work. Of course, Dave knows that because he works in some of these loony places, and we don't go on and on. I won't go on and on and on, but I'll tell you this, the presenter was so good. I thought, you know what? I'm going to reach out to you as a guest on the podcast. But it was someone who's been in college admissions in 4 different schools working with rural students. But anyway, I think we get the point. All right, let's move on.
All right. Number 2, the second principle or characteristic of experiences that help students learn is they must require students to have active engagement. He says, quote, they must invest energy in resolving the tension between the new and the old. And what can you add to that, Mark?
Yeah, and a couple more things I loved in the article. Here's another quote. It says, the most persistent finding has been that learning is not a spectator sport. As a colleague put it, for the turtle to advance, it must stick its neck out.
Yes.
For learning to occur, students must engage the challenge meaningfully. The higher the level of engagement, the greater the educational benefit. So what would be some practical examples, Dave, of active student engagement as a way to reinforce learning?
Well, getting involved in certain types of organizations, getting involved in extracurricular activities, or being involved in problem-solving organizations that help the students tackle certain problems that they're learning about right now, such as global warming.
Yeah, Joy called me the other day. She was so happy.
Yeah.
There's been this course that she's wanted to take, and the professor is world renowned. And I actually, because I'm a geek, I read the professor reviews for the various professors that Joy has a choice of taking. Yeah. So I was reading reviews and they were like off the chain, like this person will like change your life. And so Joy called me because she couldn't get in the class, and she called and she actually wrote the professor, and she found out she's getting in the class. And what this professor does is she, all her research is on the sociology of prisoners. And the course is full of visiting prisons and interacting with prisoners in various capacities.
Wow.
And I think that's such an example of this. Like, that's active engagement with the challenge.
Right. Yeah. And a very common exercise that we're all familiar with is when you have debates within class, when professor assigns students sides to take in different types of arguments or issues, and will most likely have you debate the one side that you are most uncomfortable defending. So that's an example of active engagement. So,
definitely.
Yeah. Okay, number 3. These principles, these experiences must occur in a supportive environment. And by supportive, he defines that as an environment that's not coddling, but where it is okay for the individual to fail.
Yeah, I like this quote. It says, experimentation and risk-taking where failure is not only acceptable, but even expected.
Right.
And this makes sense because, if you're going to get criticized for thinking differently than the rest of the class, or for having an idea that's different from the rest of the class, then it's going to stifle that. It's going to shut it down. It's going to stymie that creativity.
Yeah.
So that's what I liked about this point. This makes sense. And this is one reason why, over the course of my time in education, I've been in a lot of different environments. I've been in extreme environments on both sides politically. Yeah. I've been in extreme conservative environments. I've been in extreme liberal environments. And I've been in more mixed environments. And one thing I've noticed about extreme environments politically is they stifle the ability for people who don't think like the majority
absolutely
to raise their views. Because they're like, look, if I'm just going to get shot down by everybody in the class, then I'm just going to keep my thoughts in my head. Which is why I actually think it's good, whether you're a conservative or you're a liberal, your education is enhanced if you have people who think differently like you in the class, because you won't just get a straw man argument. You'll get the best argument coming from adherents who actually truly believe it, not a caricature of that argument. And if there's enough of a critical mass, people will feel comfortable to express that view. And then it's just important that the teacher or the professor encourages that type of supportive environment. You were going to say something though, Dave?
Yeah, I think this is one of the major criticisms being launched against many universities and liberal institutions like today. And it's a criticism really that we label political correctness, and that we understand the need to be civil and we understand the need to be sensitive. But when that can transform into a code where certain types of thought, whether it be liberal or conservative, is no longer tolerated, or where extreme conservative views, though in many ways offensive, are simply not even tolerated, when certain speakers are banned from campus or certain viewpoints are shouted down, that is not a supportive environment. And that is not an environment that gives people the opportunity to experiment in their own worldview, different viewpoints. Maybe you might be a conservative one year or a liberal, or you might entertain certain modes of thought. You may not eventually stick with them, but you deserve the ability to at least intellectually try them out for size and to at least express them. And when dissent is suppressed, that only one point of view is tolerable, whether it be liberal or conservative, that is not a learning environment.
So the one thing I want to say about this is that this is really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
Really hard. And this is where diversity gets messy. I've experienced this firsthand. I was at Emory last year, right after there was a lot of dissent and tumult on campus over a bunch of students that were wearing Make America Great hats. And a number of the Black students thought that it was completely racially insensitive and intolerant, and that they didn't think the administration should support that. And so it became this about this balance between my right to free speech versus trying to create an environment where other students feel comfortable. Some students were interpreting it as hate speech and creating an intolerant environment. And then other students feel like I can do whatever I want. And so I actually attended with a group of students right after this broke out. And so we met with one of the leaders, and he talked about how they worked through this and how difficult it was, and how these issues are tough because some person is feeling really almost attacked, and another person is feeling like I can do whatever I want, like it's my space to do it. So I don't want to pretend that this is all Pollyanna and hunky dory. This gets sloppy and messy, but that's part of where the growth occurs. And then it's correct. Even goes farther than that. This Make America Great, but what if you're talking about Richard Spencer, who's literally trying to stir up stuff like Charlottesville and traveling around to various campuses? It even gets even harder to do you tolerate hate groups that are trying to stir up tumult on campus? A lot of people would say absolutely not, but then others would say that's a voice that needs to be heard and understood. So I don't want to pretend that these are easy issues.
No, and I'll tell you how things have evolved. I distinctly remember when I was a college freshman, and one of the issues was that a couple of the Southern fraternities were displaying the Confederate flag. And at the time, a painful decision was made to allow them to do it because they considered it free speech. But it has now become clear that what was that first free speech has really was a manifestation of hate speech. So when does free speech become hate speech? When does political freedom become political offensiveness to the point of oppression? And it's a moving line. I mean, it does change with the changing of the times and the greater sensitivities of the public at large. So there's no right answer, but I can tell you that in Mark and I's lives, we went from the Confederate flag being the icon of one of the most popular TV shows, The Dukes of Hazzard, to now being pretty much flag non grata within the whole United States. And that's just how things change.
All right, Dave, let's keep it moving because I feel we're getting into political science, philosophy.
Okay, no problem. All right. So the next one is number 4. It must encourage active real world learning. And it talks about the Socratic method, experiential method, and quote, with active learning, students often work on real world problems for which there is no correct answer or solution. Mark? And when I thought about this, I thought about co-ops and internships, but I'll let you expand.
Yep. No. I mean, it's so many things. It's all aspects of experiential learning, right? It's co-ops, it's internships, it's community service. There's no question about that. Community service is a part of that. It's study abroad. Study abroad is a fantastic example of active real world learning. Immerse yourself in a completely different culture, Right. And it's even putting yourself in like living, learning communities and some of the things that they're doing. So I think that, this is how people learn, and you learn by doing, and sometimes opportunities come up for people to do things, and they're going to be time consuming. Case in point, like Joy was involved in one of the marches, and she went all the way to Brunswick, Georgia after Arbery, was killed. Now I remember, part of me is thinking, oh, gee, COVID-19, did she go down there, blah, blah. And she had some other things that she could have been doing with her time that were valuable. But I remember, what I said to myself? I said, you know what? You'll remember this when you're 75, and of course you will. It was a very, very formidable experience. So yeah, like look for schools that emphasize, normally the term you'll see is called experiential learning, but it's real world learning. And those are some of the big categories: co-ops, internships, study abroad, and community service.
Awesome. Number 5, they must involve other people.
Yeah, and it starts out here by saying that, look, there's an aspect of solitary activity when it comes to learning. They're not disparaging that. You learn by reading. You learn by studying. You learn by viewing art or witnessing an event. So they say that is a component of learning. But the challenge occurs often when the student is engaged with peers or mentors. Any examples of that, Dave, you want to share for our listeners?
I'm thinking.
Put you on the spot there. That wasn't part of the planning.
What I was thinking about when I was thinking about the contrast of learning through the internet, learning through Zoom video. Yeah. And I'm thinking about my daughter's reaction to when she all of a sudden had to take her classes online, and how she felt her learning was so significantly diminished because in isolation, it did not challenge her and it did not expose her to other viewpoints. And so when it talks about involving other people, the first thing I think about is the difference between in-class learning and online learning. So I'm not sure if that's what...
No, and I'll tell you another example, and this comes to mind. So tomorrow, Dave's driving from North Carolina to meet me in Atlanta, treating me to Longhouse Steak for a good steak.
That's right.
Staying over at our house for the night and then flying back to Chicago. So, but what we're doing is we're inviting one of my students who I've wanted him to meet for a long time. Actually, our longtime listeners may remember her, Lauren Stenson. She was the very first student interview I ever had on this podcast. So she's student body president in high school, and she's at the University of Richmond, and she's just rocking it and crushing it. And so the reason I'm bringing her up is because she's been able to do a number of really impactful things at the University of Richmond. One of them is she started a group on campus that has to do with racial awareness and tolerance that is now spread to 80 campuses. 80.
Wow.
And she's over all of that. So this is learning. It's involving people. And the other thing I thought of that she's done, and this goes back to when I was talking about experiential learning, I mentioned co-ops and internships, study abroad, and community service, but I left out the fifth big one. There's 5 big. What's another big one, Dave, that's part of experiential learning? Any idea? Because Lauren has done this at Richmond from the time before she even started there. Richmond has a program that takes incoming freshmen. I'll give you a hint. They pay them to do something.
Oh, tutor and mentor.
Well, that's also another form of experiential learning. Tutor and mentor. That's another one. No, you know what it is? It's research.
Oh, yes, of course.
Research. Yeah, you should have got that, all the work that Lauren did in high school.
That's right.
Lauren, that was one of the things that helped get her in Yale. I'm convinced of it. Lauren did advanced research on, how do I say, Dave? BRCA? Is it called BRCA, the gene?
The BRCA gene. That's right. Cancer,
Yeah, BRCA gene related to cancer because long line of breast cancer in the Williams family on both sides of the family. So Lauren got intrigued, did a lot of high-level research with that and presented her research findings. And goodness gracious, I tried to read this thing and it was like, I couldn't even understand the things she said. I felt like she had 10 PhDs. But the point is, that's learning. That's involving other people. That's how you learn that way. You learn that way. All right. Number 6.
Invite or promote reflection. And, that actually goes back to involving encounters with challenging ideas and people. And one of the phrases that they said in the first one is that if the encounters are just right, it's not too major, it's not too minor, it opens the door to deeper knowledge and self-reflection. Well, here it is. When it's all done right, it invites the student to look inward and to grow through not just looking outward, but looking at himself or herself.
Yeah, one of my big regrets, and of course, it's never too late to start. And I did this a lot in my late 20s and even into my early 30s. But I've rarely done this since then. It's something my daughter does a lot. My brother Norm does it all the time. And that's to journal.
Yeah.
Journal is just really, really powerful because you're reflecting and you're processing. And that is a form of learning. Yeah. So there we have it, Dave. Any overall thoughts on the article? What should the takeaways be for our listeners?
Well, I think the takeaways is that we are at an inflection point that we've talked about where we are really looking at the old streamline of in-class learning and how it's being challenged by online learning. And I still think that online learning has a lot to offer. I think one of the challenges of online learning is to look at these principles and say, can we incorporate these principles into the offerings that we're now going to give students? I think we can, but I think that's going to be challenging because I don't know how you involve other people. I don't know how you have a supportive and but challenging environment within the online space. I'm sure someone's going to figure it out, but I don't think it's as simple as just, getting a series of videos and putting them online and thinking you're going to recreate an excellent learning experience when we understand the 6 principles that have been outlined here.
Yeah, and I think that this just provides a framework that I would like to see our listeners use to assess quality education.
Yep.
As I mentioned it at the start, if you're a teacher, put yourself through this paradigm and ask yourself, how do I implement these 6 things?
Yeah.
If you're looking at, thinking about switching high schools for your kid, look at how does the high school incorporate these things? And certainly for everybody evaluating in college. Because I know I was impressed when I read this is based on 7,000 studies and 50 years worth of research. And then when I read the points, I mean, I can't disagree with any of them, Dave. You know what I mean? Like they all make sense to me. They're all consonant with my own experience. So
go ahead. And I got to tell you, when you do your college spotlights, I naturally gravitate to certain things. Like, myself and Anika, we gravitate to those diversity statistics because we know that without a certain level of racial diversity and socioeconomic diversity, it's going to really be hard to have an environment that's truly going to challenge people by surrounding them by truly different people. I'm very attracted to many of the programs that have co-ops and internships because I know that is encouraging active learning from real world experiences. When we talk about schools that have a wide variety of extracurriculars, whether it be debate or drama and so forth, I can see that that's active engagement. So even though we didn't really have these neat categories to put them in, I think we've always used a lot of these principles when we talk about the colleges and the strengths and weaknesses of many of the colleges you profile in your college spotlights.
Points well taken. And I'm going to segue right now just because I kind of have a rule and we violated the rule.
That's right.
40 minutes max between intro and article. So we're at the 40-minute mark. So Dave, you and I can talk for literally hours on this. And probably if Dave and I, as soon as this podcast is over, we'll probably pick it up, just the two of us, and start jabbing with each other on this topic. But we'll spare you that for now.
Sounds good.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, Anika, $1 million question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to be like head in the sand and not know what's going on with all this COVID stuff. And I know you do because you were COVID burned out 4 months ago.
Isn't it 5 months now? Like it was
5 months ago. You were probably burned out. So how did you process in Javon, as you kind of went through the whole thing of should Naya be in the dorm? Should she take a leave of absence? Should do a gap semester, gap year, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of pros and cons? How did you weigh all that in your mind?
Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't hard. She absolutely is reporting on August 7th.
Mm-hmm.
And
I know that because Dave's trying to throw his big steak dinner then, and so I found out you can't come. You can't come because she's moving in the dorm, so we get that.
That's big move-in week, and she, it just wasn't a question in terms of a gap year. Like we knew because the thing is with Janae, she missed so much. I mean, obviously, thousands of kids, millions of kids have missed so much. So there's a serious psychological impact behind it that we have to consider, or at least me as a mom considered in terms of her moving forward. Like I couldn't imagine. Now I'm not saying that I would put her in a situation that's dangerous. I mean, obviously the institution is putting all these measures in place. She doesn't have a roommate. There's a lot of work that's going behind, the opening around the campus. Not everybody's coming back and all that stuff. So, it was a no-brainer that she's going back. And she's comfortable with it. So
part of what you're saying is, I know she was a boarding school student at Georgia and had to leave abruptly and miss the end of her senior year graduation and all of that.
Everything.
So you're saying, you got to take into consideration all the stress that's already occurred because of the separation.
Right. Exactly.
Now, do you think in your case, because you work there and you're privy to some of the things the institution's doing, that gave you some extra confidence or not really?
No, I don't think so. And the reason why I say that is because their outreach to the community was pretty much equivalent to the internal. And they said that like we're not holding anything back from the outside community versus the inside community. And they wanted us to, be comfortable with that. Like there aren't going to be any surprises to anyone. So all the measures that have been taking place, everything, their communication has just been top notch, honestly. So, yeah.
So you know what I was just thinking? Between you and Dave And me, we represent the full spectrum.
What do you mean in terms of decisions of,
Yeah, because Dave is like, you're not going, the way Dave does his things in his families, they got to vote. So there's 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it started out originally like Frida and Lauren, like, we're going back, and it was 1 against 2.
Mm-hmm.
But he eventually persuaded them to his view, and they voted, and he won, or he got his way.
Mm-hmm.
So she's taking a leave of absence, and she's doing all the super creative things. And this is a good time for me to announce it. I'm actually going to interview her on the podcast.
Oh, nice.
So you'll be hearing Lauren Williams. Yeah. Talk about how she's creatively using her time as a gap year to do some really productive things. So
cool.
I think you're going to look forward to that. So that's one view, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's Lauren. And then I would not have been comfortable in a dorm,
mm-hmm.
and I would not have paid for that. But with Joy being in an off-campus apartment, I was okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're comfortable in the dorm. Now, would you have been comfortable if she had a roommate and it was a double?
I think so still. Because of the measures that are in place. Like, they're not just bringing kids back to campus. Like, they're doing things, they have internal quarantine areas. They have a mask requirement. They have social distancing guidelines that are in place. I mean, there's a lot of work that's going into that. So I would still feel comfortable with a roommate.
So we represent all 3 views of the spectrum. Because my experience is college kids are not going to social distance. I don't care what the administration says that they're putting in place.
Right.
That guard's going to just get dropped.
Yeah. And I think that's everywhere too, though. I think, Lauren may still experience that wherever she goes somewhere else. You know what I mean? So I don't think you're just because you're going to campus that you are the only group that's going to, not totally 1,000% abide by the rules. There's even what makes me even more comfortable is that, staff are even being trained, because staff are asking that question, like, what if kids don't comply? Like, what are we supposed to do about that? And they're making it clear that these are the guidelines that you have to follow. Or you will be considered to be removed from this community. Like, either you're going to be safe or you're not.
So what I think is important is just, we're 3 adults. We got all kind of came down 3 different places on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're somewhat of a microcosm of kind of where society is on this one.
Right.
And it's, just Anika and I were talking off air. This is such a personal decision, and one thing like that I think you said is important is you have to look at this in the context of your kid's overall mental health and not just as an isolated question.
That's right.
But I do think it's important to be very circumspect because for anyone who didn't read, there was a Georgia camp that this thing just went through it like wildfire, residential camp, and darn near wiped half the camp out with the super spreader, but they were not consistent mask wearers.
No, they didn't require a mask at all, right? Like, they were like,
they made it optional.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so, right. So I think that's, that's not what you're saying either. That's why I brought that up. You know what I mean? You're not saying, just go at it. Like my, I love my niece to death, my brother Norm's daughter. And I was talking to her about this and she's like, look, I'm so tired of this thing. Like your time is your time. Like, you're going to die at some point. So if it's my time, it's my time. I'm like, no, Kristen, please, no.
I don't know about that. I want you to go get treated if you contract the virus. Don't just sit there and be like, you know what? I'm just going to run out. Don't do that. But I feel I totally understand what she's saying.
So, you know what? I'm going to check back with you, Anika. Like, when she's there, you can give us updates, how it's working and all that. That'll be interesting to get your perspective. But for now, let's transition. We are in 133. And 133 means that it's chapter 133 in the book that I wrote called How Does a Typical Family Pay for College? This chapter is a little different than ones that we've done in the past, Anika, where in the past, I talk a lot and give my perspective on things. This entire chapter, I'm sharing research that has been done by Sally May and Ipsos, who've done a survey for 10 consecutive years looking at how does a family pay for college.
Right. So
you've read the chapter. How do you want to tackle this one?
Well, I'm glad you said Ipsos because I was wondering if I was pronouncing it right. There.
See, you're so humble. I would have just kept that in my head and she bailed me out.
I'll just be like, hey, whatever. Just correct me. But so it's just that. So it's their research on the different categories of paying sources for a family on how they pay for college. And so, it breaks out into like 2, 3, about 6 categories. And it starts with scholarships and grants.
Well, let me say something first.
Okay.
Let me say something first. So the survey consisted of 1,600 people.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
It was 800 parents of undergraduate students, and then 800 undergraduate students themselves, all between the ages of 18 and 24.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to let people know like who was in the survey.
Gotcha.
And they've done it for 10 straight years, but this is like the recent one. So you want to dive in?
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
So the first category of paying is through scholarships and grants. Now, do you mean you want to go through the percentages now as the way you have them listed?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So we've got scholarships and grants in first place at 35% of how college is paid for.
And I just want to say something. That does include Pell Grants. So that Pell Grant students are what 1/3 of students in college, by the way. I mean, 1/3 of current college students get the Pell. So it's so that's both institutional, merit-based, institutional need-based, and federal or even state. State, so it's really government money and college money there.
Okay. And then in second place is parent income and savings at 23%.
Now, do we need to define that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Do you know what they're referring to?
I mean, I'm assuming it's actually, no, I don't, because I was thinking about it in the terms of, okay, this is how much the parent has, that whole, what do you call it? Formula when they come down and say, okay, this is your expected family contribution. And maybe they don't even really know, like, how do you know I'm getting this out of my checking account versus whatever else? I don't know.
Yeah. So this is really 2 categories. So this could be any college saving fund that you have, like if you had a Coverdale or 529. So this could be a savings account, but it's also your income. So it's also just the overage between your expenses, and your income. So that's, let's say, you got $500 a month that you're pulling from your income every month that you're using to college off of so that's really what it is. So so it can be savings accounts, or it can be just money you're taking from your check every month.
Okay. All right. In third place, which I was a little surprised by, is student borrowing at 19%.
Okay. Now, why were you surprised? Did you think it'd be higher or lower?
I thought it'd be higher, even though later you came back and said, it's up. Since that report, it had gone up 16.2%. And I wonder if it's up even more.
You're getting ahead of ourselves. That's later.
but I mean, the fact that it's number 3 on this list is like surprising. I would think it'd be number 1.
Well, I mean, that would be a lot. If you have to borrow more than half the cost of college, that'd be a lot. It's still about one out of every $5 is coming from student borrowing.
Okay.
Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com.
All right. And then next up is student income and savings, which came in at 11%.
Yeah. And in most cases, that's really student income, because from my experience, most kids don't have much student savings. And other than the fact that I guess the 529 could be in the student's name. So I guess if the 529 is in the student's name, I'm not sure if the parent's paying for that, if they're classifying that under parent savings or student savings.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how they're labeling that. But if you're talking about students' bank accounts, it's generally not going to be a lot there. But student income can be significant. Students can make, $3,000 in the course of the school year, and they can make a couple thousand more over the course of the summer.
Okay. And then another surprise, the next one at parent borrowing at 8% again.
Now, are you surprised at that? You thought it would be higher? Okay.
Yep.
So let's talk about that in real dollars. It's a $50,000 school. 8% of $50,000 would be $4,000. So that would say on average for a $50,000 cost of, a school, parents borrow $4,000. If it's $25,000, which may be closer to like a state school, then it's $2,000, just to kind of put some real numbers on it.
Okay. And then the final category is relatives and friends at 4%.
Now, what were your thoughts on that one?
That actually made a little sense because I was thinking about Janae and all her graduation money. And money, stuff that's still coming in. So that seemed to pan out about right.
Well, and I'm really glad you said that because I was going to bring that up. So one of the things I was going to say, I'm a supporter of this. Like when people want to know what to give your child for their high school graduation, I'm a big believer in letting them know, like, we most appreciate anything to contribute to the college fund. I'm serious. You should not be shy about saying that.
Well, the going thing now on these graduation, at least this year,
what the GoFundMe?
The Cash App. Like you put the little Cash App on their little card. Oh my gosh, she had so much money. It was crazy.
And that's why I own Square stock, by the way. Which is, I do. It's been one of my best produced. No, I have a list. I'm getting on I'm into investing. You know that, but I have a list of all my stocks that have like 2x or 3x or more than that's like we're double, tripled or whatever.
Right.
And Square, I think, is my 5th or 6th best performing stock that I own.
I bet it is. I'm surprised it's that low.
No, it's really, I got 60 different ones, so that's pretty high.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Best performing stocks.
There you go. So my big, what do you call it, $2 million or $1 billion question is like knowing that, okay, so you got these like averages, right? And you know, some have gone up or gone down. So how do you want us to apply this? Because we know that, all these schools, depending on which kind of school you're going to, they could vary so differently in cost and even awards.
Well, that's a great question. And so I'm really glad you asked that. So I'm all about, you have to chart out the course that's best for you. And what somebody else did is not necessarily best for you. I just think it's helpful for you to people like to kind of get a general sense how people pay for college, right? It's going to vary so much on an individual basis from person to person. So you can't just take these numbers, but I think people are intellectually curious. And by the way, let's break down what these numbers actually look like in terms of dollar figures, Anika, because I think that will be helpful for people. That's the second section I have in here. Okay. You want to run through that?
Yeah, well, so do you want to go through each one again and we can start?
Yeah, I think so.
So at the
just scholarships and grants and then the dollar figure.
Okay, so the scholarships and grants, which was at 35%, that in dollar terms, that's about $8,000, average $8,390.
Yeah.
So that
parent, we'll alternate parent income and savings on average. So that's $5,527.
And then you got student borrowing. That was about $4,551.
Yep. And then student income and savings, that's $2,569. And then what's the relative and friend number?
Relative and friend was about $1,800.
Oh, I'm sorry. Parent borrowing was $1,800.
Yeah, I was about to say, parent borrowing is $2,569. Student income and savings was $4,500. Parent borrowing is around $2,500.
And then relatives and friends, $901. So that's $901 that people got from the Cash App, GoFundMe, whatever they're doing.
Yep.
So keep using that Cash App, everybody. You're making me money.
Cash App is awesome for these kids.
By the way, PayPal has been another one. That's just been through the roof. That's been one of my.
Oh, people still using that too. That's good.
Oh, Venmo app.
Oh, yeah.
Same thing. Same thing with Cash App, Venmo app.
I was on Venmo. You got me on Venmo first, and then everybody started doing Cash App. So I'm just a Cash Apper now. But yeah.
Yeah, I use them both, but Venmo is just PayPal is like another incredible stock. Do you have any stock tips out today, everybody? No, I'm not just saying that for a selfish reason. PayPal and Venmo, and what's happening is the whole country's we're moving to the war on cash. So when that's a huge thing when I do my investing is e-commerce, because we're increasingly like this country is moving from, 16% of all purchases being done, through e-commerce to right now during the pandemic, that's closer to 30%. And a lot of people think that number's not going back. You and I may be comfortable going on Amazon, but not everybody's always done that. And other things as well. I mean, people buying their groceries, doing all kinds of stuff.
Right.
And so what happens when you move away from that is it makes, these companies, they make a killing. That's why, Amazon is another one that makes a killing. And then international companies too, like Alibaba and Tencent and so many others I could mention, but I'm probably getting off. I need an investing podcast.
Yes, you do.
There's this company called C Limited. Okay. It's in Southeast Asia. It's up 800% this year, Anika. 800%.
Wow.
800.
Yeah.
E-commerce.
Go ahead and start that. E-commerce. That's the next podcast, Mark.
Sorry.
The Darn Investment Club with Mark Stucker.
Yeah, because I could talk about Brazilian and Australian too, but we'll leave that alone. So, e-commerce, everybody. Invest in e-commerce. That's your tip.
There you go. Their tip for the day. But before we go, Mark, I do want to talk about this little story you gave in the end where you talk about how you meet with these families and because I'm wondering why you like your purpose in sharing this chapter, right? So you talk about how families, when you get with them, you say, okay, how much do you want to pay? And the family will say, okay, what do other people say? Well, I thought that was interesting.
No, that happens all the time. So when I'm working with the family, I want to figure out what's the maximum amount they can afford for college. I like to just initially get their thoughts on that, and then I take them through something a lot more systematic to actually figure that out. And my goal is, when you're building a college list, you need to not only be concerned about a social match and an emotional match and an academic match, but also a financial match. So you need to find colleges within your budget. Otherwise, nobody does anything else that way, right? If you're buying a car or buying a home, fortunately you have a budget. And a lot of times for a home, it's dictated to you by what you qualify for. And so that helps govern and guide you. But when it comes to colleges, people shop first based on what they like, and then they worry about the price afterward. And that's what gets people in trouble. That's what leads to them making commitments that they can't sustain. And that's when, by the way, all the research shows the number one reason why people don't graduate is money. So then it leads to dropping out, and then you drop out, you don't have the degree, and you still have the bills. And that's to set you up for financial peril for decades.
Yikes.
So in order to avoid that, I take people through the process, and it's so frequently they'll say to me, well, what do other people say? And so, did you say already what my response is when they say that, Anika?
Irrelevant, folks. Don't worry about your neighbor.
You know what I say? When I say that, I say, okay, we're going to do a little exercise here. You're coming in to buy a car, and I'm the car salesman, and I say to you, okay, do we want to look at pre-owned cars, like in the 5,000 to 10,000 range? Or you want me to look at, you're a luxury car buyer? Like, what do you want me to show you today? And then you say to me, what do other people do? Like that's not relevant to your bank account.
Right.
That's not relevant to your bank account. We should talk a little bit about some of the trends here too, Anika. I think it's important.
Okay.
I want to talk about any that jumped out at you, some of the either the interesting findings or the changes?
Let's see. I think, just starting from the top, 87%, 87% of scholarships or grants come from the colleges themselves.
Yeah.
That's actually good news. You got 49% of students received a merit-based scholarship. So that's about half. That's not too bad, not too shabby. 47% received a need-based grant. And the
next part is interesting. It talks about how the cost of colleges vary in different parts of the country in general.
Okay.
So $35,431 is the average amount that families spend in the Northeast. And that region has a much higher percentage of students attending private schools, which is that's where a lot of the private schools are. So that's why that number is so high. Now, when you go all the way to the other extreme, $20,953 is the average amount spent for college for students that go in the South. And a lot of times in the South, students have a tendency to stay close to home more than any other region. They don't venture out as much. And then for the in-between regions, you got the Midwest, which is 21,577. And Midwesterners in general, this is all based on research I thought these guys might be interested about. They work more hours. Students work more hours than any other region. And actually, I forgot to mention the West. The West is slightly lower even than the South. The West is 19,181 is the average. And what happens in the West is there's a higher percentage of part-time students. So that's just some of the research. I thought people might be interested in some of the regional differences that you get when you move across the country. And some of the trends, scholarships and grants as a way of paying for college are up. They're up 32% since 2013. Parent income and savings is down since 2013. Student borrowing is up 16.2%. And student income and savings is also up 12.5%. Parent borrowing is almost unchanged. And then guess what? You mentioned this. This won't surprise you, Anika. Gifts from friends and relatives up 16.9%. That Cash App.
And we love it. But Mark, I'm going to go back to those averages by the region. So those are annual averages, right? Just to be clear.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, but I just think there's two things that are interesting with that research. One, how the price point varies so much. I mean, the Northeast is almost double the South and the West. But also, the research also shows the reasons why, right? In the South, people tend to stay closer to home. In the West, people go part-time more. In the Midwest, students work more hours. And in the Northeast, students attend private schools more often than public, a higher percentage. So just interesting stuff that we thought you might be interested in the results from, this Ipsos Sallie Mae survey.
And there it all is.
You know to say Ipsos. It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Our question this week comes from Miss Lily. She's a student from GA. And Lily says, I'm applying to Oglethorpe University, and they are asking me to describe an event that had an impact on my life, and I can't think of anything. How should I answer this question, Mark?
I love this question. Thank you, Lily, for sending this in, by the way. So we've been getting a lot of student questions, which I like.
That's great.
Love parent questions, too. Love college counselor questions. Love them all. Send them our way. Questions at your college-bound kid. Let us know what question you want us to answer. We're not as many. We don't have as much of a backlog as we've had in the past. I think we got our questions assigned through 137, but there's an opportunity to still get in the month of September with some questions. Okay, so I want to share 3 stories really quickly, super fast. And I feel like a lot of students are kind of thinking like Lily, meaning they think that you have to have some exceptional event in your life. And there are people out there like that. 3 stories quickly from students I worked with either this year or last year. One student was homeless in the 7th grade and lived out of a car. Another student had cancer at 13 and almost died. And a current student I'm working with was on his bike, hit by a car. The car ran him over, literally over his rib cage. And he was in the hospital for a long time. But God, thank you, Lord, he's safe and fine and doing well. So students think they need to have some kind of event like that had an impact on their life. And while I shared 3 stories with people, that's last year and this year. And I typically work with 100 kids between my school, what I do with my school and what I do privately. So it's not that common to have some exotic story like that. And that's the first thing I want to say is you don't need to have that. That's not what is meant by an event. And you shouldn't be looking for something spectacular. Hopefully I didn't create that expectation by sharing the stories. Just realized maybe I shouldn't have done that.
Well, you made it clear immediately after.
Oh, good. So that's the first thing. The second one I will say is everybody has an event because we're all impacted by something. So we all have something. We're all products of our experiences. So the third thing I want to say is if you're not sure, nothing's come to mind, this is when you can brainstorm. You don't have to come up with this in your own head. Ask your parents, ask your brother, sister, friend, best friends, ask those who know you best. Are there any events that you can think of in my life that have had an impact on me? So the initial idea does not have to come from you. So that's the next thing I want to say. The next thing I want to say is it's okay for it to be mundane. It's not about really the event. It's more about how it impacted you. So for example, here are examples of some things that clearly can't rival being run over by a car or being homeless for a year in the 7th grade or almost dying of cancer, but they'd be perfectly fine to write on. So here's one. When we moved to a new town, it had an impact on me. When I switched from elementary to middle school, it had an impact on me. When my brother went off to college and I had to adjust to not having him in the home anymore, or my sister, it had an impact on me. So those are things that are not like this dramatic story that, boy, can I write a movie about your life? But it's all about how it had an impact on you. And that's the next thing I really want to focus on. So look at what the question says. They are asking me to describe an event, and I think people get frozen on the event. The next part says that had an impact on my life. Now, this is extremely important. The essay is not about the event. I can't stress that enough. The essay is not about the event. You use the event to describe, to set it up. What colleges are looking for in this question is your ability to communicate what you learned and how you grew. What did you learn and how did you grow? That's what they're looking for. They want to see your growth. They want to see your growth, and they also want to see a certain element of self-awareness, your ability to reflect on your experiences and learn from them. So that's my answer. Anika, what are your thoughts?
So I wonder if there's a difference between mundane and trivial. Like, okay, my best friend stopped talking to me this summer. Or, I stumped my toe and I was in so much pain and my brother teased me. Like, is there some I don't want it to, is there such a thing that's something like, okay, that's not really something you want to talk about? Or
no, that's a great question. So what I would say with that is I would really be a little bit of a literalist here on an event. So if it's something that happens over and over and over again, it's not necessarily one incident, then that wouldn't make a lot of sense, right? Like, so if it was something like, let me see, it would be something that I'm trying to think on the fly here, I was thinking of something really, really trivial, like they canceled my favorite TV show and they can't watch it every night
there
now.
You go.
So,
that's a good one.
Yeah. So I would not go there, but a broad range of things can qualify if they had a big impact on you. Like you gave me an opportunity to underscore one more time, this is really about its impact on you and your ability to reflect and communicate what you've learned, how you've grown, and show your self-reflection skills. So if it's something that had an impact on you, then most of the time it's going to make sense for it to qualify.
Okay.
But I would stick to the word event, not something that kind of happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. So, Mark, who should Lily go to be reviewing her answer in her essay?
Well, I'm personally working with Lily. I know that, so I'm helping her with that, but
okay.
That's, but if it's not that case, if somebody else, whoever is in your circle, that's going to vary from person to person, whether you're working with your school counselor, whether you have outside help, or whether it's a parent, you know what I mean? It's like, I kind of feel that's outside the scope of this because there's so many different answers that apply to different people depending on their situation. Some people work in community-based organizations. I mean, there's just a lot of different people that can do it. But,
and I guess the reason why I asked that is because is there someone to say, hey, these are some of the ideas that I have?
Well, so for that, what I recommend for that, what I'm getting at is somebody who knows you really well.
Okay.
So that's why I said a parent, a sibling, or a really good friend. Okay. So what I'm looking for is someone that can help you if you're stuck, that can do some brainstorming with you as to like an event. And you think of, I'm drawing a blank. Do you remember anything in my life that seemed like it kind of impacted me? I mean, really, you're just going to the answer to that question is who knows you the best.
Okay.
Who knows you the best and who has, and somebody that, has your best interest at heart, and do some brainstorming with them. But what I find for this question in reality is once people start reversing the thinking and not focus so much on the event, but they start reflecting on times in their life when they changed and what caused them to change, and they focus on that, they kind of reverse it, that it can trigger things. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that helps is, quite honestly, just what we did already, is we start giving examples of things that seem, mundane, trivial. And I'm really using those pretty much, euphemistically. Once you start giving examples of the kinds of things that are perfectly fine to write about, that tends to also trigger people's ideas. Because what people do tend to be thinking, I find this all the time. People think if they don't have some dramatic story, that they're going to be at a disadvantage in the college writing process. And that's one of the myths out there. Like I didn't, build a village in Nairobi to help, kids that were homeless with their education. I never did that, but I heard about someone on the internet that did. Like, I'm screwed. Like, this is how people think. No, they do. I know that example was out there, but
I know that happens a lot. I do know that.
Oh, no, the other thing they think too, and I'll tell you what, I've been hearing this a lot this year, more so than any time, Anika. Like, people are so concerned that they're going to be considered privileged, and it's going to hurt them in the college admission process.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm hearing that a lot. Like, I don't want to come off like I'm white privilege, and I feel like I'm saying this and I'm going to get labeled white privilege, and it's going to hurt me. I'm telling you, I'm hearing that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so people feel like they're at a disadvantage if they don't have a story that showed how hard life was for them, and so that's why sometimes this question can create stress.
Oh, but Mark, what about, we talked about a couple of weeks ago about the Common App question about COVID. Now, they made it, that whole conversation was around them making it clear, don't use COVID throughout your application.
Correct.
But this is college specific. So I can't remember what we said about that. Is this an opportunity to talk about COVID or not?
So I wouldn't focus on the COVID, but let's say, for example, and this is actually one of my students and this year, and he had this unbelievable research opportunity all set up for him at the University of Michigan. And that program got canceled. So if that was something that he felt drastically impacted his life, that could be an acceptable topic. I just wouldn't go into the COVID part of it that much. You could just mention it, but just don't go use the other essay to really go deeper in the COVID part.
Right.
The focus should just be on it got canceled with, the global health crisis we're struggling with right now. Like, one little line, and then go into, the impact it had on you. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. So you can use it could be something COVID related, but the focus of this should really be on how it impacted you, how you grew from it, and what you learned about yourself through the self-reflection piece. And that's what they're looking for.
Okay. Got it. All right, Miss Lily.
Go for it, Lily. Knock it dead. What do you got going on, Anika?
More shopping for Janaea. A few days away.
Woo. Yeah, countdown is on, and move into college is a real deal for you.
Yeah, we actually did pretty good this round of getting ahead of ourselves. So,
what does it feel like having your daughter go to your alma mater? Like, none of my kids even considered.
You know what? It's funny you
Michigan
ask that
State,
because I don't. I'm curious to see how it goes. I've been thinking about that. Like, how should I be feeling about this? Am I going to see you on campus? What's going? Especially since I work there. Like, that's
and that's the other thing. You work there,
yeah.
So you're going. She passes you with her friends. Trying to go get something to eat. Like, how you gonna feel about that?
But what I'm gonna tell you,
how's she gonna feel about it?
Well, she's like, well, we're gonna go to lunch once a week. Then we're going to work out. Like, yeah, she's like, we'll work out twice. I was like, Janaea, you don't even know what your I feel like she's underestimating her schedule so much. And by the way, Mark, she's like walking onto the track cross country team.
Oh, so she is.
Oh my God, she is going to do it.
I'm not surprised because anybody who's working as hard as she was on her own free time, they like it a little bit more than they may think,
Yeah, she reached out to the coach and he looked up her times and he's like, come on. And it's crazy. So I'm like, girl, we'll see. But the fact that she wants to have lunch with me is kind of awesome.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm going to tell you something. My kids love me to death, but if they were coming at the same college if I worked at a college and they were there, they would not been saying we're going to have lunch once a week and we're going to work out once a week. I'm just telling you.
That's what she's saying now. We're going to see what's going to happen.
Just the fact that she's saying it now, you better like record that little speech on your little iPhone.
Just take
record
that and roll with it.
Play it back. Because that is priceless right there.
Yeah, she's already having such a great experience. She's just kind of like on a high right now. So yeah, it's all good.
Not only that, like I've worked with a lot of kids that have gone to the same school where their parents worked. And the typical thing is like, don't be trying to come up and hang out with me and my friends. Like,
she made that part clear. Don't be popping up in this dorm. Now that I think about it, maybe that's why she's already outlined it. Okay, I'm coming to you at these points in time. And that's all you get.
I get it.
Yeah, me too. I got it now too.
Oh, now I see where she's coming from. You like, I'll see you, but on my terms, with my quota,
terms only.
Don't be there. Don't be coming over to the honors dorm because it's not happening.
And that's all. That's so Janaea. So there it is.
That's why she's smart and she got a full scholarship.
Exactly.
Friends, I know you heard part 1 last week with Lisa Przekop. And in part 2, Lisa shares with us why the graduation rate is so low for foster care students. She talks about imposter syndrome, and it's a major problem with foster youth, and she describes it for us, why it's such a major problem. I asked Lisa how a parent or a student can know if college is foster care friendly or not. How do you know? Is it foster care friendly? And Lisa talks with us about how UCSB started their own foster care program. We learn how to find out if a school has a specific foster care program. And finally, Lisa helps us to understand foster youth, so much more. So this is the final part on foster care youth. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
Let's talk about graduating, because that's another challenge. I also learned from that same PowerPoint you did that only 5% of foster care students who do enroll actually graduate.
Yeah.
So that's like 1 in 20, which is really sad. So
what are the very sad.
What are the factors keeping students from graduating once they arrive?
I think a lot of times it comes down to finances. Even with financial aid, it's hard. And especially these days, I think students are fearful about accumulating student loan debt. And so finances, I think, is the biggest obstacle. And one that I really try to talk with students, there is financial aid. And especially when I'm talking to students who, are in more traditional sort of group homes and they don't necessarily have family, and they're concerned about what happens when I age out of the foster care system. All of a sudden you're on your own and with no finances. And I tell them, one of the best things you can do is be in college. You have residential housing for 4 years. You have financial aid. You have time to develop yourself and prepare for a career. It really is the best option for foster youth. So finances is a big one. One of the things that I've really noticed with my own students that I work with is I think they truly avoid asking for help. And maybe it's because, if you're in a foster home, especially, you want to lay low. You want to bring as little attention to yourself as possible, because you want that placement to be healthy and you want that placement to last. If it's a healthy placement, right? So you don't want to do anything to stir the pot, get things, get yourself in trouble, or get your foster parent angry with you. And so I notice what happens is some of those survival skills that maybe were effective when a student was in foster placement are not effective when they get to the university, because they don't ask for help when they really need it. And all of a sudden, if a student that I might not know very well, perhaps hasn't been active in the program, will all of a sudden show up in my office. And at that point, the problems that they bring have been compounding. Maybe they didn't do well academically their first quarter, and instead of asking for help, they just kept making the same academic decisions that got them into trouble in the first place. And by the time they finally seek help, they've gotten themselves into a more desperate situation. Whereas if they had just come to me the moment they noticed, hey, I'm struggling, we could have provided them with all of the resources and help that they needed. So I think this habit of sort of laying low, avoiding asking for help, I can fix this myself, being that, again, that self-reliance that got them to this point can sometimes be the habit that hurts them when they get into higher ed, because the most successful students in higher ed are those that reach out for help.
Most definitely. And that's something that applies to everybody of all social classes. Be an initiator. I try to teach that and drill it in all of my students. Be an initiator. That is so important.
Absolutely. So important. And then lastly, what I would add is maybe with this group, and I see it with a lot of first generation students too in general, is sometimes they're seeking majors for the totally wrong reasons. They might not have a significant interest, say, in business, but they'll choose that because they think that's the major that they're going to make the most money in. Mm-hmm. And they're tired of struggling with finances. And you know what? I want a career that I'm going to make money. And so they'll choose a major that's a bad fit. So, we admitted them. We know they have the academic talent to be successful. That was never in doubt, but they put themselves into a field for which they have absolutely no passion or very little interest. Mm-hmm. And so then they struggle academically. And when I talk to them, it's like, let's find something that you love, and then we'll find a way to lead you on a career search that allows you to use that passion where you will have a successful career. But I do see a lot of foster youth, especially, choosing majors for the wrong reasons, and then that can lead to them not being successful.
That does make sense, because I've noticed over the years that some of my students I've worked with that are the most financially challenged are the most focused on where am I going to make money? Where am I going to make money? What to make money? And it's understandable. What about imposter syndrome? Is imposter syndrome something that foster care students struggle with? Because that would make sense.
Completely. All of a sudden you are thrust into an environment that is so different from anything you've been in. The best example of that I could give, Mark, is I had a student talking to me about move-in day in the dormitories, mm-hmm. and how it was probably one of the saddest days of her life, because, you have that traditional picture of the parents helping you come set up your dorm room and helping you with the bed and moving you in, and those sort of rituals, crying as they say goodbye. And, it is a bit of a ritual, that sort of passing you on to the next step of your journey. And, this particular student talked about how sad it was because she, got herself, found a friend who would drive her to, the university and helped her carry in her boxes. There were no rituals, but you want to fit in desperately. It's your first day in the residence halls, and right away, once she was alone with her roommate, the roommate's asking, well, where are your parents? Well, asking her a lot of questions. Why didn't people help you move in? And what are you doing for spring break? And all those kinds of questions. And these are students who are not coming from that stereotypical traditional setting and still trying to pretend that everything's cool. And I think that's when the imposter syndrome starts, that very first day of moving into the residence hall.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard, hitting you in the first day. And it all makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, later in this episode, in our College Spotlight, you'll hear me talk about Loyola Marymount University, LMU. This is the third Jesuit school we will have featured in our College Spotlights. In this College Spotlight, you will hear me describe the unique strengths of Jesuit schools. So I'm not going to repeat that here. But if you're a regular listener of Your College Bound Kid, then you know that I'm very bullish about Jesuit colleges and universities. Our recommended resource for episode 133 is the Association of Jesuit Schools. On this website, you will find information on 28 different Jesuit schools in every part of the country. The website is ajcunet.edu. That's ajcunet.edu. We will put the link in the show notes. We will now return to my final part of my interview with Lisa Przekop. So how can a parent of a foster care student know that a college will be I'm going to call this foster care friendly, for their student? Like, what should they be looking for if they're trying to suss out an environment that's safe versus not safe?
I think the most critical thing is to find out if they have foster youth programs. Now, most, if not all, public universities will have some type of a program. In California, every Cal State University, the CSU system, all of the community colleges, all of the UCs, we all have programs. Private schools, it might vary. Large private schools probably have them. Smaller private schools may not. And the challenge, unfortunately, for families is they're all called something different. So it's difficult to say, give me a list of everybody who has guardian scholars, which it's called at most of the UC schools, but not all. So I think the easiest thing to do is call the admissions office, because your admission counselors will know if the university has a special program for foster youth. And I think it's truly beneficial to go to a school that has such a program, because yes, we offer services and support and academic advising and all the things that we think will help the student be successful, but we also create a family away from home. We do fun events. We'll have, for instance, at my house around the holidays, we'll have a cookie decorating party. And it's just, come into my home, decorate cookies, do something fun, do something with a group of students who understand your background. You don't have to explain your situation. They understand your sense of humor. They understand your background. Imposter syndrome goes away. You can just be fun and not feel like you have to explain yourself. So I think it's a big benefit for students to find these programs, because it does create that family, the family away from home that maybe you haven't experienced up until this point.
That's fantastic. And I know that you guys have a strong program at UCSB, and I'm sure it's gotten stronger over your 35 years as you've watched and observed and seen what's worked and hasn't worked. Are there any things you can share with us that you particularly do at UCSB that you think makes your program for foster care youth one of the stronger ones?
Yeah, well, I think all of the University of California campuses have great programs. I got my inspiration actually watching a program at Cal State University Fullerton, who has a wonderful, wonderful program as well. And we didn't start our program until 2008. And one of the things I didn't discuss is how we started it. And it came about because I met a student at a community college who had finished all her transfer preparation, but was talking about the fact that I don't know what's next for me. It's like, well, why aren't you transferring? And she made, oh my gosh, Mark, she made every excuse in the book on why she couldn't transfer. And I kept after her for 2 years.
Wow.
Before I finally got her to submit an application. And, and I said, you know what? I don't even know how many foster youth we have on our campus. It's just not something, we had looked into really. And so the application for the University of California for admissions actually added a question in 2008 to the application that said, do you have experience in the foster care system? And it's with the addition of that question that we realized we actually had a rather large population. So we have in any given year about 150 to 170 students enrolled at our university that have had some experience in the foster care system.
Oh, that's great.
So it was larger than we thought, and that's why we started the program. I should also add, sometimes these programs are within financial aid offices. Sometimes they're within the support centers for first-generation students at the University of California. It's called the Educational Opportunity Program, but most colleges have support programs for first-generation students. And so you can also ask those programs if they have a foster care program, but your admissions counselors should know.
Yeah, that's great. So in winding down, is there anything at all that you haven't shared about foster youth that you want to share?
Oh my gosh. I'm biased because I'm so incredibly impressed by this group of students. They're incredibly resilient. Faculty should know that they're speaking a new language to the student in terms of what is a syllabus, what are midterm exams, what are final exams. The student might not have history with this kind of thing. So to be patient, I would encourage anyone working out at a university, that it sometimes takes multiple efforts to reach out to these students, because again, they aren't always going to make themselves known. They're not always going to ask for help. We have a regular email listserv to students, and I have students who I have contacted with emails dozens and dozens of times before they even respond. So it could be, a lot of our emails are informational. So, hey, there's a workshop about this, or hey, there's an event about this. And some students prefer not to be actively involved. And then out of the blue, their junior year, someone will walk into my office and say, I need help. So, college folks out there, you got to keep at it. You got to keep reaching out to the students. College admissions people need to understand that the students' applications might look very different than a traditional application. Grades may fluctuate. They may leave all the family information blank, because maybe they don't want to share it. They may talk about their foster youth experience. They might not. But you have to be flexible and understand, when I speak about resilience, that a lot of these students are breaking long family cycles of tragedy. There may be years of alcohol or drug abuse in the family. There may be years of generations of mental illness that has affected the family. So these are the students who are breaking the cycle. And for that, they should be given extra support, because they really are, generational trailblazers, really.
Lisa, this has been great. I know I've learned a lot. I think all of our listeners have learned a lot. I really appreciate this. And thank you for sharing this. And we look forward to having you back next week to talk about how the UCs make admission decisions.
Oh, that'll be a simple conversation.
Yeah, you talk about that every day. You eat, sleep, drink, breathe it.
Looking forward to it.
Next week in the news, a story from the Hechinger Report by Sarah Budimowitz and Pete D'Amito. An analysis: hundreds of colleges and universities show financial warning signs. Mark and Anika will discuss what are the areas where admissions counselors are often not totally honest with me when it comes to money. Our question from a listener is, what is the application process for the BS/BSN nursing programs that you can start as a freshman? Our interview is part 1 of 2 by Lisa Przekop in understanding how the 10 University of California universities make admission decisions. And our college spotlight will be, finally, Tufts University in Massachusetts.
Okay, friends, I'm very excited about this. It's a school I like a lot, Loyola Marymount University, a.k.a. LMU. And I will be using LMU because Loyola Marymount is a mouthful for me to do every time. That's our call spotlight for today. And I have to give a special shout out to Vicky, who hails from Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin. She's the one who asked us if we could do this. So when students want a Jesuit education on the East Coast, especially Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, they'll often look at places like Georgetown or Loyola in Maryland, or they'll look at Boston College or Holy Cross or Fordham. But when they want a Jesuit education on the West Coast, there are 4 or 5 places that frequently come to mind. A few we've already done spotlights on. 3 schools in California and another school. Dave, any idea? Some of the other Jesuit schools we've featured already.
I was going to ask you, we haven't featured this, but is Loyola in Chicago Jesuit or is it Catholic?
Yes. No.
It is. Yeah. Okay. So Loyola.
So Jesuit is a form of Catholic. It's strand of Catholicism. Yeah.
Okay. So you already mentioned Georgetown. I know Loyola.
I'm talking about on the West Coast.
On the West Coast? Oh, wait. Bingo. Oh boy. Stop Pomona.
No, that's okay. Let me bail you out. I'll be your lifeline. I'll be your Anika.
Yeah, give me my lifeline.
So one of them I'm going to cut you some slack on, which is the University of San Francisco, because I did that before you came on the podcast. Yes. But the one I thought you would remember was Santa Clara, Claridice.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So those are some of the popular Jesuit schools on the West Coast. Another one that's really popular outside the state of California is Gonzaga. So those are some of the really popular schools. And Jesuit schools, as I mentioned, it's a variation of Catholic schools, but there's a very strong focus on social justice for the less fortunate. Very strong commitment to community service. Very strong commitment to ethical leadership, to developing the whole child, to intellectual rigor. But the focus is on how your life has a purpose beyond me, myself, and I. And there's a strong commitment to creativity. So anytime I meet someone that's gone to a Jesuit school, and I work with a chain of Jesuit schools in my day job called Crystal Ray, over 30 Jesuit schools all across the country that are fantastic. And I have several kids I work with there in my college counseling load. They always develop those convictions that I have to do something with my life to make a difference with those who are less fortunate than me. And LMU is no different. So if students like a Catholic education in the Jesuit tradition, they're the only Catholic school in Los Angeles. Now, if you're thinking, well, I'm not Catholic. Well, guess what? Only 37% of their students are Catholic. So almost 2/3 are not. So don't feel as if you won't find your tribe there unless you're Catholic, because the majority are not Catholic. Once again, this should not surprise you based on what I said. Students are passionate about community service here. And in total, LMU students log over 200,000 service hours. In fact, once again, here's proof of that. Make a difference in the lives of others. A very frequently heard motto you will hear at LMU is this: improve yourself by helping others, which I love, by the way. Improve yourself by helping others. That inspires me. And one of my favorite things about LMU is the balance. Students are happy here. It's not the stressed out vibe you get when you visit some colleges, where you feel like 18-year-olds are supposed to be 30-year-old Wall Street execs. They've got a very good work-life balance. This is a friendly place. This is a place where people ask how you're doing and they stop and ask if they can help you. Not everybody, but a higher percentage than most campuses. They've got ambitious kids there, no question about it. They care about their future, but they bring this work-life balance that, quite honestly, I find a lot at a lot of the California schools and a lot of the West Coast schools. I find there's just a culture there where they know how to enjoy life a little bit. And I think it's healthy. There's also an optimism on that campus. And I actually had 2 students this year that I worked with, both of whom I thought would end up at LMU. One ended up picking USC, which is also in Los Angeles. And then one ended up at Miami, all the way in the South Florida. But both of them I thought were going to end up at LMU. They had fantastic visits. So this is a supportive community, and it's a community where creativity really thrives. It's located in West LA in the Westchester section, not too far from the beautiful Marina Del Rey area. We're talking 1 mile from the beach, and we're talking about vistas where you can see the Pacific Ocean. Wow. This would be one of these campuses that would be in the conversation for one of the most beautiful campuses you've been on. Now, beauty's so much in the eye of the beholder that I hesitate to say that, but maybe I'm biased. But that is just a gorgeous campus. That's a beautiful, beautiful campus. Now, I say campus, they actually have a few other campuses. I'm talking about the main campus, the Westchester one. They also have a downtown campus where their law school resides, and they have a newer campus in the Playa Vista campus. That's where grad students study film, TV, and business. And they've become a school 30 years ago that was more of a Los Angeles school to a school now that's a national and an international school. They've really, really, really gotten word out very effectively about what they have to offer. And students that look at LMU will often overlap with several other schools that have some things in common with them. And those schools would be Chapman, University of San Diego, Santa Clara, and USC. So those are some of the frequent schools that if you like LMU, you probably should also be looking at Chapman, San Diego, Santa Clara, and USC. if you're, on the higher end of the students they attract. So LMU has a solid core curriculum that involves having every student take courses in a number of areas, including science and society, culture and art, faith and reason, and virtue and justice. And they also have a tremendous amount of support for first-year students involving many things, including first-year seminars, an excellent orientation program, and plenty of learning and living communities to choose from. They have both academic living and learning communities as well as interest living and learning communities. They're Division I, and they play in the West Coast Conference. Do you remember back in the day when they used to LMU used to be really, really good?
Yes, I was going to say they had a run in the 80s there they were. What happened to them?
I don't know, but they're not anymore. They're not a sports powerhouse. Their most successful programs now are water polo and women's volleyball.
Oh, man.
but it's a place that does have a lot of fun built in, and that rah-rah, especially with their rival. And their rival is Pepperdine in Malibu. So when those two go head to head, it's the face paint, it's everybody coming out, and it's a lot of fun. So let's talk about some of their top programs, because they have some absolutely outstanding programs. Their film school, I don't think anybody would doubt that it's a top 7 film school in the country. And it's a huge draw for people that want to go there. It reminds me, Dave, last week when we did that whole article on schools adding majors and certificate programs. And we said, you got to use your location. Remember? We said, if you're in Vegas, you got to do gaming. If you're on the ocean, you got to do marine biology. If you're in DC, you got to do international relations. Or if you're in Virginia, and if you're close to LA, you got to do film, right?
Got to do film.
And Atlanta's becoming the same way because we've become such a film capital. All the colleges in Georgia are bolstering their film studies programs. You got to take advantage of that. So the film students, they get some great opportunities. They get to go to Germany and make documentaries in Germany. It's pretty cool. Another exceptional program is theater arts. I mean, that's exceptional for them. Really, their whole visual and performing arts would be really good, whether we're talking about cinematography and film, drama and theater, fine art, studio art, really strong. And then another program that, in fact, this was one of my students who I thought was going to go there, because, you can argue they're top 3 of the country on this, which is playwriting and screenwriting. Wow. That's just exceptional if you're interested in playwriting and screenwriting. So those are exceptional programs. But they also have some other programs that are really great. So, because they're a balanced institution. So in the liberal arts, they've got some really strong programs in political science, government, and international relations. Economics is strong. And speech communication and rhetoric is a very strong program they offer. And then what's nice is they also still have the engineering and the business. So their strongest engineering programs would be civil, electrical, and chemical. And then in business, which is another reason why people go there, they've got strength in finance and marketing and accounting. But one program that they have that's just a standout is their entrepreneurship major. And it draws a really high percentage of students. So it's one of their top programs. I've heard good things about the law school, but I don't know that much about it. I just heard reputationally it's on the rise. And so those are some of the things programs wise where they have some strength. I'm going to take a stop here, Dave. I'm probably at the 2/3 point and see what popping for you so far.
Yeah, you didn't mention, do they have a medical school and do they have a pre-med program?
Yeah, that's not their forte. So they know what they're good at, and
okay.
And that's not
and in your description, it almost reminded me of a recent college spotlight we did with Carnegie Mellon. I mean, and then they seem to be quite well balanced in other ways as well. Carnegie Mellon, of course, does have the science component, but you mentioned Loyola Marymount, also had a strong engineering department.
Well, and I would also say that I do see a lot of similarities with Chapman. Yeah. And I can understand, that's another spotlight we did probably 2 months ago. And of course, in that same area geographically. So you can see why Chapman also has the fantastic studio arts and the film and the playwriting, the screenwriting. And I can understand why there'd be a lot of overlap. And also size wise, those schools are pretty similar too. So I totally get that. Anything else you want to say?
Well, yes. And I do know that the 3 LA coastal schools. I mean, you got UCLA, that's in Westwood. You got Loyola Marymount, and you got Pepperdine. Now, USC is out there, but that's in the center of LA. So I know when I was in LA, those were the three.
Well, Pepperdine is more Malibu. So Malibu, right. You are going quite a bit there. I mean, it's gorgeous as well. Beautiful ocean views. I mean, I bringing back memories. I had some good seafood when I was there last time when I was there too. Making me crave some seafood bringing up Pepperdine.
That's right.
All right. Some more information about let's get into some statistics.
Right.
So, great size school, 6,700 undergrads, a little more than 3,000 grads. Kind of love that size school. Small enough to get a lot of personal individual attention. Class sizes are small. But yet big enough to offer pretty robust curriculum, give you a lot of choices when it comes to clubs and students and things. Acceptance rate, 47% from an admission standpoint. 1 in 4 women are in sororities. 1 in 5 guys are in fraternities. One of the things they're really known for, which is fantastic, is their internship program. I mean, they've got one of the reasons why people go there, besides the beauty of the campus and the strength of some of those unique programs, is their location. They take advantage of the location and they are plugged in. They develop your network and they are plugged in. They've got strong connections to Hollywood, to Warner Brothers, to MTV, and to Disney. And they take advantage of and they leverage those connections with a fantastic internship program plugged into all of those things. And so that's one of the things you get there is that network when you go there. It is a school you're probably going to need a car for. Everyone I've known that's gone there has said it's pretty tough without a car. Public transportation is probably not going to cut it. Just one of those things to keep in mind. Another thing about the school, Dave, you mentioned this, is people love their diversity. They've got some strong diversity in a lot of different ways. I mentioned before religious diversity, but let's get into some of the other diversity. They have students from 93 countries, which is a lot for a school of 6,700 kids, right? 10.1% international. So about 1 in 10 kids, 48.8% white and 24.3% Latinx. They're also 10.7% Asian. They're 8% Black. And then they've got, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, also there, Alaska and American Indian. So it's the full, that's also been, and then multiracial, they're another 8%. So a lot of students I've worked with that really like diversity and like a school in the city and around that size have really been attracted to it. So also people that want kind of a real good place that's friendly and warm and caring that's got really good academics. So it's a little bit on the racial diversity. Let's talk a little bit more about, their academic profile. So I'll get into the test scores of their kids. So when it comes to the math SAT, 27% of their kids score between 7 and 800. 49% score between 6 and 700, and 23% score between 5 to 600. And if you're not getting that, you're not getting in. That's kind of where it ends. And then on the evidence-based reading and writing, 20% 700 to 800, 62% 600 to 700, 16% 500 to 600. It kind of ends after that. And on the ACT, 43% of students have a 30 to a 36. 54% have a 24 to a 29, and then 4% got in with under a 24. As far as performance in high school, 44% of students were in the top 10% in their high school class. 73% were in the top quarter of their class. As far as grade point averages, 50% had a 3.75 or higher, 24% a 3.5 to a 3.75, and 16% had between a 3.25 and a 3.5. in high school, and 7% had a 3 to a 3.25. It's a 142-acre campus. 50% of the students stay on campus. And I just love the school. I love it. I love the warmth. I love the strength in some of the majors. I love the diversity. I'm a sucker for a gorgeous, beautiful campus with close to the ocean. I got to admit, one thing I'll say about LMU, it's a good thing I didn't tell Joy about this because she would have been nagging me 24/7 to go to this school. I know what she likes. and it is $72,000 too, so I wouldn't have liked that part. So it is $72,000 cost of attendance. Of course, they do give both need-based and merit-based aid, and I have seen them be pretty generous for high flyers on the merit-based side, but they're not a school that has enough money to be able to give full demonstrated needs. So they're going to give the stronger packages to the stronger kids outside of the need-based analysis. So any final thoughts on LMU, Dave?
Well, yeah, I mean, bottom line is if you're in the arts and the theater, of the college spotlights that we've done, several stand out, and I guess this would be in there. I mean, we talked about Chapman, that has a very strong arts program. UFC, it needs no explanation. Carnegie Mellon was very interesting, and now we can add that to the mix. So the question is, where would LMU fall among those four, would you see, in the strength of its arts programs?
I mean, it can compete with any of them. I think.
Awesome.
I mean, it's just as good as any of them. I think it'd be other factors that would determine, which school you would go to, because you would see all of them as being creme de la creme. But, I think one thing that I like about them, in addition to that, is some of the strengths they have in other areas too, like the political science, the speech communication rhetoric, and then their entrepreneurship program. So that entrepreneurship program, I mean, it has around 80 kids every year that get degrees in that, which is a lot for a school that's, graduating, maybe like 1,300 kids a year, 1,500 kids a year. Like, that might not seem like a lot, but, you don't see that high of a percentage of kids majoring in entrepreneurship like that.
No.
So I like the fact that if you like business, you can do it. Now, if you're interested in civil, electrical, and chemical, you can go there. If you're into the liberal arts, they've got strong econ. They've got strong, they're strong in a number of areas. And then, of course, film, TV, cinematography, playwriting, blah, blah, blah. They've got all that. So it actually ends up being a school that I can put on quite a few different student lists when I'm working with them.
Awesome. It sounds like a very, very solid school. The only concern I would have is it does seem a little pricey. And, when you talked about real cost of attendance, is it one of those schools where it's $72,000, but when you actually add in your application, it, most of it goes down 20, 30 grand, or is it true 72,000 for many kids?
Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And I always tell people, ignore cost of attendance, look at net price, which is what you have to pay. Okay. Yeah. And so I almost hesitate to even mention the cost sometimes, because that sometimes just, kind of blows away everything else I say. Students can end up paying substantially less, either by qualifying on a need-based analysis, or a merit-based analysis. Now, I will say this. When you're working with a school that doesn't have as much money, like, at Chapman LM, you don't have as much money as a USC. So if it's a kid that's really doesn't have much money at all, let's say you're on the lower end of the Pell Grant recipient side, there's a good chance that you're going to be asked to pay an amount that's going to be difficult to pay without a significant commitment to loans. That's just that kid. There's a lot of other families that don't fit in that role, but there's others that would argue that the connections that you get there are so strong that it's a great investment. So, I tend not to put the school on the college lists of people that are really, really financially challenged. But there's a lot of people that, they can pay a decent amount. They just can't, and they can't pay the full amount. It doesn't deter me. The $72,000 doesn't deter me at all. They could easily come away being asked to pay 30 or 40 easily. Yeah. And maybe even 20, Yeah.
Nope. That sounds good. Sounds like a great school, great solid addition to our lists.
What else sounds good? That steak dinner we're going to have tomorrow night, man.
That's exactly right. In fact, I have to start packing now because, I have to go to work, and then right after 7, hit the road and meet you at the steakhouse.
Meet you at the steakhouse. It closes at 11, so we'll get a good. I'll make sure I'm there by 9:30 in case you put your pedal to the metal a little bit. And if you don't get there till 9:45 or 10, that's all good. I'll just be getting caught up with one of my former students, while we wait on you.
I got my Nissan Maxima. We'll be pushing the pedal to the metal a bit.
No convertible this time?
No, man, that's another sad story. It turned out, believe it or not, because of the pandemic, National sold off most of its convertibles.
Oh, man, Dave. That was a highlight for you, getting that convertible.
It really is, man. That was, now Now I can truly say with all the rest of my brethren, I'm suffering.
Well, guess what? I'm working with several students in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And it's a really good thing you're not there, Dave, because that storm hit Connecticut hard. I mean, several of the Connecticut students I'm working with have been without electricity for a while now.
I know. I've been blessed. Yeah.
Yeah. So you could have been up in Connecticut without electricity, man. And that would have been rough.
It really would have been. So God is good.
Awesome. All right. See you tomorrow night, my friend.
Take care, Mark.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. Your College Bound Kid is produced by Dave Vasaya of podcastengineers.com. If you find this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that can really use this information. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Our image editor is Tauha Khan. Webmaster is Stalianos Dimitru. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. And if you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340. And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like to ask us, and we'll include them on the show, you can just email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions. So send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.